then insightful session on this. And I hope they will implement all these inputs in their release notes life cycle and also in their day-to-day life cycle. And further questions they can ask in all our WhatsApp and Telegram groups, and they can join there and they can connect with you.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much, Sanulata.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's welcome our next speaker of the session, Janeera DA. She is a senior technical document writer with almost 10 plus years of expertise in academia and IT, with expertise in technical writing, UX writing, research, patent and proposal writing. And she is currently associated with Kowai.co, and she has a specialization in UX text creation, document review, and also feedback integration. And she has also proficiency in Document 360, Metaflair, DevOps, Canny, Camtasia, and also workflow creation and content delivery. And she has also 3 years of experience into SaaS-based product companies, which is ensuring documentation accuracy, and also she's into mentoring several teams. She has a PhD in brain computer interface, and also she has teaching experience in engineering. And her key strengths lies in simplifying complex technical information for diverse audiences. And let's welcome her for this session. Over to you, Janeera.
Yes. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for that introduction, Preeti, and thank you, TWT, for the opportunity. So today we are going to dive into the most often overlooked backbone of successful software releases, documentation. So in recent days, technical documentation is gaining a lot of attention. Before we step into the writer's shoes, let's step into the customer's shoes first. Imagine this: you're waiting for a new software update that promises to solve a few of your headaches and introduce cool features. Now the update rolls out, but you have no idea what's changed. It's confusing, right? So, this is where release notes step in. So, it's a bridge between the product teams and everyone who uses or supports the products. So, we are going to talk about release management, documentation workflow, what release notes are, why they matter, how companies can make them not just functional but impactful. So this is my agenda. So I'll be taking you through the development and documentation interlink, and then a little bit about Scrum, about release workflow. I'll touch upon DDLC. And then I'll give you a case study where two companies, how they streamline their approaches. And I'll talk about dark releases and feature flags, which is a cool technology that can be used in documentation, and a few tools of the trade, and then conclude. Excuse me. So, sure, we all love the exciting features, bug fixes, and what connects the development team, products, and users, and everyone in between. It's documentation. And the role of technical writers is critical in this entire workflow. So, think of me as a guide on your journey from the initial concept of a product and all the way to its release, with a particular focus on how documentation fits into agile and scrum methodologies. So let's start with the basics. Agile. Agile development is all about flexibility, collaboration, and delivering small incremental updates rather than a massive overhaul all at once. So this keeps the product evolving and improving consistently. Now, Scrum is one of the most popular agile frameworks, and it helps teams to work in short iterative sprints, mostly 2 to 4 weeks long. And each sprint ends with a deliverable, a piece of product that is ready to go live. Almost everyone working in the software industry must be familiar with this. So, where does documentation fit into this fast-paced iterative approach. Well, documentation can't be an afterthought. It must move in lockstep with the product development. And that's where we as technical writers come in. So in Scrum, there are several stages, and technical writers have a unique role at each stage. Let's break it down. So what does a technical writer do in sprint planning? So this is where the team decides what work to do in the upcoming sprint. And as technical writers, we are not just silent observers. We are proactive participants. And at this stage, we understand the user stories, ask clarifying questions, and determine the documentation need for each feature. Whether it's a new feature, an enhancement, or even a bug fix, documentation should be considered even before the work begins. And daily stand-ups, these are quick daily meetings where team shares the progress and obstacles. And it's critical that technical writers attend these meetings to stay in the loop. So we keep track of how the features are evolving, ensuring that documentation stays current and aligned with any changes that happens mid-sprint. And sprint reviews or demos are at the end of each sprint. And this is where we get a first-hand look at the feature or enhancement that is done and developed. So we use this time to finalize our draft, confirming the accuracy of what's written and make sure it reflects the actual product. And sprint retrospective, after each sprint, the team discusses what went well and what can be improved. And documentation is a really big part of this discussion. So we review our process and make sure we adapt to the continuously improving process alongside the development team. So let's zoom out a little and look at the full release workflow in agile environment. So pre-sprint, the technical writers are already involved. They are analyzing the user stories and creating a documentation plan. You mention your availability, your time, and all that. And during the sprint, we are continuously collaborating with the development teams, with the QA teams, attending stand-ups, and we are continuously updating our drafts. And post-sprint, we review, we refine, and publish the documents alongside the release. So the document development life cycle, we have planning, drafting, reviewing, editing, publishing, and maintenance. So this is a pretty much a common life cycle that almost everybody is familiar with. So here, maintenance is of key importance. Just because your document is live, it doesn't mean it's done. Software is evolving. So must the documentation. So we are responsible for keeping the document up to date as new sprints bring in more changes. Also, we incorporate the missing information that are identified with no such results or even support tickets. So what does release notes capture? So think of release notes as your product's spokesperson. It's a technical document that rolls out every time a software version or update is released. It highlights what's new, what's improved, and what's fixed. But more than just a record of changes, it's a way to keep users and stakeholders informed and engaged. And you can make sure that they are excited and they are not confused. So who reads your release notes? Let's talk about audience now. So your end users read it. They need a clear snapshot of how the changes affect their day-to-day use. Your support teams need it. They need to be ready to assist the customers with latest product updates. Your sales and marketing teams read it. For them, release notes are gold. So it gives them the hot features that they can shout about. Your development teams also read it. Of course, they need to keep track of what is done and what is next. So there are different readers, and different readers have different needs. So your release notes have to balance out these requirements. And what the release notes contain, it can contain a lot of information. It can have build numbers and the version identifiers. It can have new features and improvements, bug fixes, known issues, product screenshots, UI changes, links to the detailed documentation, and it can also have what's coming next. But the key is you include what is relevant to your audience. Don't overwhelm them with unnecessary details. A quick note here, never confuse release notes with change logs. Change logs are basically comprehensive list of all the changes made since the first time your product was introduced until today. But release notes focus on the most important updates, and that truly matters to the users. So when you talk about release notes, less is more. And each organization has its own style when it comes to release documentation and workflow. So there is never one size that fits all. So some teams thrive on comprehensive details, and some teams prefer quick point-to-point summaries. Adapting to documentation and release notes to fit the product and adjusting to the unique workflow and culture of your organization is the most important feature to keep everybody informed and engaged. In some organizations, it may not be practical for the writer to go and attend all the Scrum events. So, in these scenarios, the interaction between the SME and the writer will be minimal, and the responsibility of the writer is a lot because they have to provide very accurate documentation. So let me take you through a case study of two entirely different companies. So this is company A. Company A has multiple products, multiple tech writers, and multiple Scrum teams. All these teams are working simultaneously, and there are very frequent releases. So the challenge is often there was confusion, there was missed updates in the release notes. So to fix this, the company came up with two smart solutions. So the first thing is whenever something needs to be included in the release notes, there is always a user story on DevOps or a feature on Jira. So they created a specific toggle which the development team or the product manager marks as checked when that particular item has to go into the release documentation. So when this happens, when this toggle is turned on, an RSS feed picks a webhook is set up and it picks the data from the ticket, and it brings up a card on the Teams channel. So this makes it easy to get a notification whenever the documentation requirement is marked, ensuring that nothing was overlooked. And then also an automated process was set up in Microsoft Teams where you have a process called workflow. A card can be created. So in this, the teams responsible for product releases, they triggered a card every time the product was ready for release. So the writer was assigned to that card and approvals were processed. Release notes corresponding to the documentation is published along with the product update. So with this, the entire approach is streamlined, and company A organized the entire release process, even though there were like n number of products, n number of writers, n number of teams, each writer working for multiple teams, but still nothing was missed because of this streamlining process. And next we talk about company B. So this company had only one product, but multiple writers. And there were multiple Scrum teams working on this one product. So now, each time a release goes out, there is a huge volume of features that come in. So there is no, so what happens? So there, you cannot put the entire burden on one person to do the entire release documentation. Even though if it is just the release notes, it is important that you have to understand all the features. So that is the first approach this company tried. So one person tried to take up the entire release notes from end to end, and it quickly became overwhelming and it didn't work out. Next, they tried the too many cooks approach, where everyone contributed to the release notes. All the writers had their hands on the release notes, and you can guess how that went. There was no consistency or structure in tone. No matter how hard you try, every writer has a unique tone and unique style. Finally, they landed on an approach that worked, a collaboration with one writer as a lead, and the team fed in information. But the lead writer crafted the final draft, giving it a unified voice. The key was planning. They developed a critical template of questions. They developed a template of critical questions where the questions were like, what are the user challenges that this feature addresses? What is this feature about? Why does it matter? How will it make the user's life better? And so on. So each feature had 3 to 4 sentences, a visual, and a link to the detailed documentation. And guess what? It worked like a charm. So these are two scenarios. And it is the golden rule is crafting crisp content, especially when it comes to release notes. What is the problem statement, what it addresses, and how it solves the problem, and its key USP. So with this, the organization B's release notes went from verbose to sharp, with user feedback dramatically increasing. So now,
Janeera, you are left with only 4 minutes more.
yeah, okay, sure, thank you. So now I'd like to talk about two very cool features that they use in development, that they use in coding. So it is dark releases and feature flags. So imagine you're rolling out a software feature secretly, like setting up a grand surprise party. All the decorations are in place, the cake is ready, but the guests won't see any of it unless you reveal it. So that's the magic of dark releases and feature flags in software development. Features are developed, but they are hidden from users until you decide to flip the switch. Here's how this concept can powerfully tie into documentation. So dark releases is when dark release happens, the code for the new feature is pushed live, but it remains invisible to users. Meanwhile, technical writers can quietly start documenting the feature, create user guides, how-tos, release notes, but keep them unpublished and mark them as drafts, and prepare everything until it goes live at the right moment. And feature flag is like this on-off switch, where with the feature flag, new functions can be enabled for specific groups like beta testers, internal teams, and so on, while the content is hidden from the rest of the audience. And then once the organization decides to roll out the entire product to the whole crowd, then you can make it visible to everyone. So these are, I'm just touching upon the features. And then lastly, I would like to talk about tools that empower technical writers. So there are Document 360, which is an all-in-one knowledge-based platform for which I am the technical writer working for the team that develops Document 360. And there is Confluence, which is a go-to for collaboration. There is Jira, which helps you in organizing. There is Madcap Flare, which helps you with multi-channel publishing. You can publish your articles on mobile, web, print, everything from from a single source. And then documentation and release notes is speaking new languages now. That is, you would have seen the new Teams update. So instead of going to the release notes and reading it, it pops up on your Teams window itself whenever there is an update. So tools like AppQs and Pendo helps you does that. And those are really cool, and it makes sure that the audience get attention and they are in track of what is happening with the product. So in conclusion, to wrap it all up, documentation is not just a task to check off at the end of your release. It's an integral part of agile workflow, and it supports communication, collaboration, and most importantly, user satisfaction. So from release notes to user guides, every piece of documentation is a reflection of the product's quality and the team behind it. So as technical writers, we are not just translating technical jargons, we are telling the story of a product. We are making sure it's engaging and informative as possible. So they are a vital communication tool, and when done right, it can improve user satisfaction, it can reduce confusion, and it can even build excitement of what's coming next. So make your documentation clear, make them engaging, and most importantly, make them matter. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you, Janeera. It was a great presentation. Um,
Thank you.
if anyone has any questions, Janeera is ready to take up the questions.
Yeah, I can see a hand of Jewel. Yeah, please go ahead and unmute yourself, ask the question.
Okay, everyone. I'm happy to be on this call. I hope I'm audible enough. All right, fine. I will assume the silence to be that I'm audible enough. All right. That was a great talk, and I really learned a lot from the talk. But I just have a question to ask. My question is, what would be your advice to a solo technical writer that joins a startup, and the startup is like 3 years already in existence, and is trying to spin up a release note for their products? What would be your advice? What would be the suggested approach for this solo technical writer to adopt and to start creating release notes and manage release notes for the future runs of the products? I hope that was clear enough.
Sorry, can you come again?
Awesome. Okay. My question is this: what could be your advice or your suggested approach to a solo technical writer that joins a startup or joins a company that have been in existence for 4 years, but they don't have a release note in place? Now he has to create the release note and manage the release note over time. So what approach will you suggest this solo technical writer to adopt or to follow while carrying out these tasks?
Okay. Yes. Thank you for the question, Jule. So you don't have to create release notes for a company that has been there for 4 years. You don't have to create the release notes for the releases that has happened earlier. You start with what is gonna happen next. So let's say you have just joined your organization. So do they have a version number for the releases? So that would be the first thing you'll have to check. So, and the software teams are developing, so that things are happening in parallel. So there is a product manager who is working on things, there is a development team that is building something, and there is a tech writer. So even though they have just joined the organization, there is a tech writer. So you start now. So what are the features that they are developing, whether they work in sprints? So what are the enhancements they are developing? What are the bug fixes they are working on? And yes, when you think of the 4 years that the company has been around, it will be too much to look at. But if you start looking at it from what is happening right now, what is the next release, when you look at it from that perspective, things will simplify. And then you can go back, understand the document further. Wherever you want to make enhancements, you can make that. But release note documentation starts only from when you start it. You don't have to create backlogs for release note documentation. Maybe even if you do, you don't have to publish it online. You can keep it internal for yourself. But what starts now is what matters the most. I hope that makes things simpler at your work.
That makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah,
Thank you
you.
very much.
We have one question from Parvati. She says, is Document 360 a paid version? Can we use it for free?
Yes, it can be used free. There is a free plan also. You can use it for free forever, or you can try other plans. The trial is 15 days only, but there is a free plan also, which you can use. There's no timeline for it.
Thank you, Janeera.
Thank you.
For any further questions, we can take up later in our agile groups. And Janeera, thank you very much for that well informative session on how well we can capture release notes and the documentation release workflow, and the example that you gave on the company A and B, and also about the feature flags that we use in release notes, and what all tools that we can use in release notes. I hope all our users and participants can well relate with the release notes things that you explained us. It was a very well explained session, and thank you very much. And over to you, Anshita.
Yes, Janeera, I couldn't agree more with the Preeti. It was really a wonderful session. So yeah, now coming to the
One
session.